Chaptered Minds.
Ooh.
It's AI-powered for book lovers and curious minds where books meet tech. Follow, review, and share.
Hey, you. Feeling a little lost in your 20s? Like, what are you even supposed to be doing right now?
Totally. It's such a whirlwind.
Well, we're diving deep today into 101 Secrets for Your 20s. This book by Paul Angone.
Oh, I love that book.
You submitted it, so I think you're hoping it has some answers. For all those what nows you're facing right now.
It really is, like a guidebook for navigating this crazy decade, feeling lost and excited all at the same time, you know?
Exactly. And it all starts with this idea of the quarter life crisis.
Oh, yeah.
Which I'm sure you've heard of. It's like, wait, shouldn't I have it all figured out by now?
Right, but the book actually says that this feeling is totally normal.
Okay, good.
It's not a sign of failure, but like a period of exploration and transition.
Interesting.
Angone compares it to walking down a dark hallway
Okay.
with tons of rooms to discover. It's scary.
Yeah.
But also think about all the possibilities behind each door.
Right. Okay, the hallway analogy is a bit freaky. I get it, though. So much potential, but it's kind of scary, too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the book even tells this story about this guy named Peter. He's 26, has what looks like a great job.
Perfect life, right.
From the outside. But inside, he feels totally lost and unfulfilled.
Oh, I know that feeling. It's so relatable.
Yeah, Peter's story, it just shows how this quarter-life crisis thing can happen to anyone, even when it seems like you're doing everything right.
So we're in this quarter-life crisis, feeling all this pressure to do what we're supposed to be doing, but the book says to just chuck that whole supposed to thing right out the window.
He literally says, tie an amble to it.
Yeah.
And chuck it in the ocean. No more supposed to.
Such a great visual. It's so freeing.
Right. He wants us to ditch those expectations that society throws at us. What are some of those supposed tos you're carrying around?
Yeah.
That you think you could chuck overboard?
Ooh, that's a good question. You know, it actually reminds me of this whole chapter in the book about embracing embarrassment.
Oh, yeah. I love that part.
It's so relevant to letting go of expectations. He even tells this funny story about himself missing out on a free guitar.
No.
Because he was too afraid to go on stage and play air guitar.
Oh, I remember that. It's such a good point, though, about how fear can hold us back. What if you just went for it, even if it meant looking a little silly?
Totally. So many of us can relate to that fear of looking foolish. But honestly, some of the best moments in life come from taking those risks.
Putting yourself out there.
Even if it means you might embarrass yourself.
And speaking of things that can hold us back, let's talk about the comparison trap. Social media, right?
I know, it's everywhere.
We're constantly comparing ourselves to everyone else's highlight reels.
It's exhausting. The book even calls it obsessive comparison disorder, like it's a real thing.
Well, it kind of is.
Yeah.
He talks about how limiting internet and TV use is like putting on blinders, focusing on your own lane, not getting distracted by everyone else. And then he talks about celebrating your own accomplishments, no matter how small.
It's so important. Shifting your attention to your own progress instead of always thinking, oh, they're doing so much better than me. Celebrate your own wins. Appreciate how far you've come.
Right. Everyone's journey is different. Comparing yourself to others just steals your joy and motivation.
He even compares scrolling through social media to upgrading your comparison problem. From a Prius to a Hummer.
Oh, I love that.
It's true, though. We're choosing to fuel our own negativity. But on a more serious note, he talks about how important it is to ask for help. He's super open about his own struggles with depression and how much reaching out helped him.
What I love about that is he's normalizing asking for help. It can be talking to a friend, family, a mentor, or even a therapist.
He even says that finding a counselor can be overwhelming, but it's such an important step. For your mental well-being, asking for help, it's actually a sign of strength, not weakness.
Totally. And you know what? It leads perfectly into the next big thing, finding your tribe, surrounding yourself with the right people.
Like he's saying, ask for help, yes, but also be careful who you surround yourself with.
It's huge.
He talks about how college friendships can change so much and how important it is to find people who lift you up, challenge you, and support you.
It's building your own personal board of directors.
Yeah.
For your life.
I love that. And he gives us some red flags to look out for, like people constantly shoot down your dreams, you know, those reality checkers.
Oh, yeah, those are the worst. We need people who champion our aspirations,
Yeah.
even if they seem a little crazy.
Absolutely. And this whole idea of finding your tribe, it's just as important in our work lives too, which is actually what he talks about next.
I'll did segue. So work life. He really dives into it. He doesn't sugarcoat things.
Not at all.
Office life can be hilarious,
Yeah.
but also really tough.
Rough.
He even has these classic awkward coworker types.
Yeah.
Like the mumblecore, the one-upper, the shoulder rubber.
If you could forget, the
Yeah.
dreaded micromanager. They're everywhere.
Yeah.
But while those stories are funny, they highlight how important it is to be self-aware at work, and to communicate clearly and set boundaries. Because in any job, you're going to encounter all kinds of personalities.
Yeah, being able to navigate those personalities is key.
Speaking of navigating personalities, let's talk about relationships. Angone doesn't just talk about careers. He goes deep into friendships.
Yeah.
And romantic relationships.
All the messy stuff.
Because, maintaining friendships after college can be hard. And dating, forget about it. There's so much pressure. He actually gives this great piece of advice that really resonated with me.
Oh, yeah. Tell me.
He says to think of dates as a way to hone your taste, not necessarily as a search for the one every single time.
It takes the pressure off.
Right. You're just seeing what's out there, learning about what you do and don't want in a partner.
And it leads right into his super interesting take on marriage. Forget the one, he says. Look for the four.
Four.
Yep. He's basically saying, look for someone who can be.
Yeah.
Your best friend, your lover, your business partner, and your confidant.
Wow. I love that. It's so practical and well-rounded. So what do you think? Are you looking for the one or the four?
It's definitely a question.
Yeah.
Worth thinking about. And speaking of thinking about what you really want in life, let's talk about passion. The book has a whole section on it.
I know that pressure to find your one true calling can be overwhelming.
For sure. And Angone actually says
Yeah.
that it's not about some big lightning bolt moment.
Yeah.
It's more about persistence, grit, and doing what you can't not do.
It's what really drives you, even if it's hard sometimes.
He even compares finding your passion to dating a Swedish model. It sounds amazing in theory,
Yeah.
but the reality is probably a lot different.
Oh, I love that. It's so true, though. It's more about the journey than the destination.
Absolutely.
This idea of finding something that lights you up, it connects to that whole psychology thing.
Yeah.
About flow states. Research has found that when we're doing things that challenge us,
Wow.
but also align with our skills, we get into this state of deep focus and enjoyment. So it's not just about passion, it's about finding that perfect fit. What are you passionate about, even if it's messy or challenging?
That's such a good question to ask yourself. What truly motivates you? What inspires you, even if it's not always easy or glamorous? And while we're on this journey of self-discovery and pursuing our passions, Angone reminds us to take care of ourselves.
Oh yeah, self-care is huge, especially in our 20s when everything feels so chaotic. He's all about those nothing vacations.
I love those.
Just totally disconnecting and recharging. He also talks about taking breaks from technology, prioritizing mental health, physical health, spiritual well-being. It's all about being intentional with how we live our lives.
Absolutely. And he even says that those things that seem negative, like moving back in with your parents or taking a job you don't love, it doesn't mean you're a failure.
Okay, that's reassuring.
It's all about reframing those experiences as temporary seasons, not a life sentence. Our 20s are full of twists and turns. It's okay to not have it all figured out.
It's good to hear that. What are some of those temporary seasons you've gone through that you thought would last forever?
That's a tough one, but a good question to think about. And speaking of things that might make us feel like we failed, as we were talking about failure, before we dove into relationships, one thing that really stuck with me was how Angone wants us to reframe our whole definition of failure.
Yeah, he doesn't see it as a setback, but as like an opportunity to learn, to grow, to build resilience. What do you think about that?
I love that perspective. It's like, instead of being afraid to make mistakes, we should learn from them. Yeah. And use them to move forward.
He talks about how being in your 20s, it's this weird in-between phase. We're not kids anymore, but we're not quite full-fledged adults either. It's like we're playing house, but with real bills.
Adulting is hard.
And responsibilities can feel so overwhelming.
He actually has this great analogy. He compares this feeling to those old Viewmasters.
Oh, yeah. I remember those. Click, click, click.
Exactly. It's like we're looking through that lens, trying to focus on this picture of adulthood, but it's still blurry around the edges.
That's so true. And I feel like the blurriness is especially real when it comes to money. Suddenly we have rent and bills and student loans. Ugh, all that adult stuff no one really teaches you about.
I know, it's like trial by fire.
And the book doesn't sugarcoat the financial struggles. He even jokes that every time you write a rent check, an angel loses its wings.
That's so funny, but so true. Rent is a killer.
It can feel really overwhelming, but he also reminds us that we're not alone in this. Most of us are just figuring it out as we go. And it's okay to ask for help, whether it's learning to budget or negotiating a salary or even just having those awkward money conversations.
Money conversations can be so tough.
With friends and family.
Right, but he says we have to have them, especially when it comes to finances. He actually says money shouldn't be a taboo topic.
I love that. And it goes back to that idea of surrounding yourself with the right people.
Yeah, people you can talk to openly and honestly about money, without judgment.
He even suggests reaching out to people who are a few steps ahead of you financially and asking them for advice.
That's a good idea.
Like, hey, how did you learn to budget? Or what do you wish you knew about money when you were in your 20s?
It's like tapping into a secret resource, learning from other people's experiences.
Exactly. It's all about building that community, not just for emotional support, but for practical guidance too.
You know, it's interesting how he connects this idea of energy drainers.
Yeah.
Not just to people, but also to this idea of complacency.
Complacency, like being stuck in a rut.
Yeah. He describes it as this disease that infects workplaces.
Oh, no.
Where people are more focused on just maintaining things than on like innovating, growing, being creative.
It can definitely happen.
And he's challenging us to be the ones who shake things up, you know, bring new ideas to the table, challenge the status quo.
I love that, especially when you're in your 20s.
Be a disruptor.
It's such a good reminder that we have the power to make a difference.
He reminds us that it's okay to not have all the answers right now, you know. Your 20s are for exploration, experimentation, maybe making a few mistakes along the way.
Mistakes are part of the process, as long as we learn from them.
Exactly. And he says, don't be afraid to zig when everyone else is zagging.
Zig when you're supposed to zag. I like that.
Sometimes the most amazing destinations come from
those unexpected detours.
Ooh, that's deep. It's about trusting your gut and following your own path, even if it's different from everyone else's. What are some zigs you've taken that led to something unexpected?
That's a good question. I remember when.
That was an awesome story. And you know, those zigs can lead to great things, but sometimes we got to know when to say no to those detours, even if they seem tempting.
So true. In fact, Angone talks about the power of saying no, which I thought was interesting. Because in our 20s, we want to say yes to everything.
Right.
FOMO.
Yeah. But he says if you're always saying yes, you spread yourself too thin, and you can't focus on what really matters.
It's all about boundaries, creating that space and time for the things that really light us up.
Yeah, he connects this back to being self-aware, knowing yourself well enough to know when to say yes and when to say no.
Which can be hard with family and friends, you know? They have all these expectations, all these shoulds and supposed tos.
He gives advice for handling those conversations. He says to have like a prepared response, something like, I appreciate your concern, but I've got this.
Setting those boundaries nicely, of course.
Right. It's not about being rude. It's about respecting your own decisions, even when other people don't get it.
It's like saying, hey, thanks for the input, but I got this. And speaking of tough conversations, he has tips for navigating conflict, which is something we all face in relationships.
He emphasizes active listening, trying to understand the other person's perspective, and then communicating your own needs, clearly and respectfully.
I love that he talks about using I statements. Like instead of saying, you always do this, you can say, I feel hurt when this happened.
Much better approach.
It just feels more constructive, you know?
Yeah, it's about finding that balance between being assertive and being empathetic, which can be tricky sometimes, but it's so key for healthy relationships. And speaking of tricky, dating. Angone doesn't hold back. He talks about the awkwardness, the heartbreak, the confusion.
Oh, a fun stuff.
He even compares dating to riding a tilt-a-whirl, nauseating, kind of rickety, you just want to get off.
Perfect analogy.
But he also says to not give up, even when it feels impossible. Dating is like trying on shoes, he says, until you find the perfect fit.
You got to kiss a few frogs, so to speak.
It's about learning about yourself, what you want in a partner, how to build those healthy relationships.
Exactly. And you know, Once you do find that special someone, he has advice for building a strong relationship.
He talks about having shared values, mutual respect, and a willingness to work through challenges together.
Because let's be real, no relationship is perfect. You got to be ready to put in the work.
He even suggests creating a relationship mission statement together.
A mission statement. Now that's thinking long term. And since we're on the topic of the future, Angone doesn't let us forget about the bigger picture. Our 20s are for exploration. But we also got to start thinking about our legacy, you know?
He wants us to ask ourselves, what kind of impact do I want to make? And to start taking steps towards those goals, no matter how small.
Finding your purpose. Living a life that feels meaningful.
It's pretty powerful stuff. And, as we wrap up this deep dive into 101 Secrets for Your 20s, I think the biggest takeaway is that it's okay to not have it all figured out,
We're all on this journey together, figuring it out as we go.
And it's a journey best traveled with a sense of humor, a supportive community, and a willingness to embrace the unknown.
So true. Remember to be kind to yourself. Ask for help when you need it. And never stop exploring. What are you walking away with today? What really resonated with you?
So many great takeaways. But maybe Angone said it best when he said, life is pretty ridiculous. We might as well enjoy the ride. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and let us know what book you'd like us to cover next. Until next time, keep reading, keep growing, and keep those minds chaptered.